Welcome to Bitcoin Escape Plan. The topic of today's video is finding the best 4-hour trades for Bitcoin. As always, we start these videos off with a quick check of the 4-hour chart to check the temperature of Bitcoin as a reward for anyone who sees these videos in the first couple hours. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you are enjoying the content. So let's take a look. We had a major break towards 94 over on Tuesday, and a retest into Wednesday, into the late evening, that we did read as a rejection going into Thursday. That's what pulled the price down all day Thursday yesterday. We had a retest of the 4-hour SMA, or almost a retest rather. We went down to it, wicked back above it, and then still struggled at this 92.6K region that I talked about all day yesterday on Threads. And then, as I expected for my last post that I posted last night, we did break back below the SMA, and that's what we are currently going through at the moment. It looks like we got pulled down to about 89.9 right there. Let's see if I have any other levels here. I don't really have any other important levels until 86.1. So I'm going to use the fib pivots as what we're looking for. 89.6 looks like the one that is being respected at the moment because we are still higher than that. Volume profile wise, we start getting thin again in this region, so we really don't want to lose this guy, or we're just going to need to fill this. Obviously, this was not enough strength for us to stay here, and then this is the anchored VWAP that I talk about all the time. I never redraw this. That is from the elder days. That's 2009 is when I drew that from. And I just leave it. And we're still below it, which tells us a lot about the market structure at the moment because we just don't spend that much time below it. So what do I think is going to happen in the next couple hours? Well, we've already seen in the early morning a break down to this 89.6K pivot. And most of the day, I would assume we're going to need to reclaim this SMA, which is still sloping upward, which is good, but that does put added pressure for it to retest higher and higher. And as this 92.6K gets pulled to this guy at 92.2, that'll give us more confirmation about the exact trend. As you can see here, that pulled it higher. Let's see another one where I pulled it higher. Oh my God, you got to go back really far. This almost pulled it higher, but it failed it. So that's the 4-hour analysis. And then actually, the topic of today's video is finding the best setups on the 4-hour chart. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is looking for, like, that is a amazing trade. That is a still pretty good trade. But what kind of differentiates a really good trade from just an okay trade? We're going to talk about it today. So for anyone who is new to my videos, I primarily use Bollinger Band 20 with an SMA close. I'm going to give you my settings, give you all the juice. I use the 20-week. I know a lot of people like the 50 and the 200. That's okay. I like that one. Colors don't really matter. These are my time frames. I didn't touch them. Fibonacci pivots is the other one that I use. Type Fibonacci. I think it's Standard Levels Pro or something like that. I forget what the hell it's called. Pivots, time frame, auto, number of pivots, 5. Again, I did not change anything else. Those are the two that I'm using. Very, very useful. That's a little tip for you. So when I'm using the Bollinger Band specifically, what I'm looking for is either an interaction with the top band or an interaction with the bottom band. And that's going to tell me whether it's a good time to take a long or a short on Bitcoin specifically, or what I end up using it for because I live in the United States, IBIT. I'm looking at IBIT. I'm trying to understand from the Bitcoin chart when is a good entry for IBIT, and it does work most of the time. Very similar targets, since IBIT for the most part is just tracking Bitcoin. So we'll talk about that some other time. But what we're looking for on Bitcoin in order to get confirmation of these trends, because if I didn't have this tool on, I would still have what I need to understand the really good trade setups. So this guy in particular, one of the first rules that I look for when I'm looking for a pristine entry for a trade is, are we outside of the Bollinger Bands? If we are outside the Bollinger Bands to the bottom, it is likely that we're going to break upward from that momentum eventually. Now, obviously, you can see a bunch of breaks to the bottom, a bunch of breaks to the bottom, a bunch of breaks to the bottom. Where is the upward movement from here? It doesn't exist yet. So you do have to be realistic sometimes about the higher time frame. And if the higher time frame looks like that, then you're not looking for a long yet until you get to around here. So basically, the first candle that you have that is recovering from there, that would be your permission to take a long. Technically, you could take it from here. That would be based on knowing these levels were super important, but kind of a different rule set than what we're talking about. So let's ignore it for now. So if we're looking over here and we're trying to get more confirmation about whether or not this is a good level to long, which in fairness, this is still a good level to long. You just had to wait. This is on Sunday. So you would have had to wait till into the day Monday and really Tuesday. So you're just in this trade for longer before you see profit, as opposed to this one on Monday itself, where you're in a better position to get profit, essentially. So say that you are someone who bought in Sunday at this level, and then price continued to drop from there, assuming it didn't hit your stop loss, and you didn't get stopped out on your trade for whatever reason. This would have been a really good time to add to that position for a long position, and then now you have more profits because you've been able to ride it. And this is, let's see, I'll do from the middle right here, because let's assume you're not a perfect trader, just like me. And pretty much you could have just ridden it to this fib pivot, called it a day, and 8% is still amazing on an option contract, still really good. Or if you're trading leverage with Bitcoin, still really good. But essentially, a 10x, or not 10x, sorry, a 10% gain for most of the day of Wednesday that you could have taken from this. So basically, you would have been in that trade for 2 days, 3 days at most. And that would have been a really good one because it broke the SMA over here. So we knew, okay, we got some downside momentum. Now, let's say you wanted to catch this trade. So this trade is a little bit less clear, but still pretty useful. So this guy, you can see here, wicked to the top side of the band, technically indicating a great short entry. So someone certainly could have taken this. I did not take this. I was moving into a new apartment, so I wasn't paying attention. And pretty much the same thing, like an 8% move, almost a 9-10% move on the short side. Now, obviously, you couldn't have taken that on IBIT because it was on Sunday, but Bitcoin itself, there's nothing preventing you from taking those trade setups. This guy over here, I would say this is a B or a C tier entry, whereas that's an A entry, or this is an S entry because we broke outside the Bollinger Bands, which means it's got to come back inside. This is a wick, which is still great information. So I would say that's an A tier. Would have been a clear short in that circumstance. This is more of a B tier, where we've already broken back inside, which is our first clue of a short. Technically, this guy would have been a cleaner entry than this one for a short, and then we just have to wait a longer period of time. This is Wednesday, November 26th, so we would have had to wait 4 or 5 days in this case for that short to really play out. And this would have just been another time where instead of it being invalidated, which it would have been invalidated if it continued past this point probably, you would have just accepted, okay, cool, I need to double down on that position. And then you really have a choice when you're getting close to the SMA, which that's this one, that's the Bollinger Band, SMA. That's really going to give us the information that we need to see, do I stay in this trade or do I exit this trade? So let's go back to this one for a second. If we took this trade, let's say we took it here, and then we double down on it here so that we are in a little bit less of a loss. We've added to our cost basis, essentially. We've reduced our cost basis, so it's now easier for us to take a reward. So already up here, we would already be in profit. A fib pivot is not enough for us to end the trade, especially if it's still looking good. And then this guy right here. Now, normally when we interact with the SMA, it's more like this. There's a lot of chop, and it would be hard to say one direction or the other. Do I want to stay in this trade? Do I want to get out of this trade? And we'll go over this one in a minute. That one's a little bit more complicated, I think. But this one, a lot easier. So this one, big old candle, we dropped right through. And then same thing, big old candle, we pumped right through. So there would have been no reason really to sell during this candle because it's ripping. So sure, if you have a lot of contracts or a large position, you can take off a little bit if you want to. But really, there would have been nothing preventing us from just watching and waiting until it got here. And this would have been the first clue, I think, of an exit on that trade, is we failed the 92.6K pivot. This is still Tuesday. So for IBIT in particular, you would have had to make the decision to cut the trade here because the market would have been closed shortly thereafter. But for Bitcoin, you could have continued to ride that, until we failed this pivot. And then that would have been the time, somewhere in here, would have been the logical time to take profits at about 8 to 10%, which is really good. If you can hit those trades consistently on a weekly basis, you will be growing your Bitcoin stack. And that's all that really matters at the end of the day. So let's go take a look at this one. So this is Friday, the 21st. Many of you will remember this day. This is when we dropped the lowest that we have dropped in recent memory, 80.4, which I talked about a bunch on Threads at the time. Go follow me over there if you want more analysis than I give on YouTube at the moment. So this one would have been more difficult, and we would have had to go off of what I would say is still a pretty good setup, but not quite as perfect as really this. This is the primo short setup is over here, and a retest over here. That's when you would have gotten like the most legendary setup for this. Let's see what percentage this is. No. Sheesh. That's amazing. You would have to wait 12 days for about a 23% drop, which is a lot in an option contract. That's a really good option contract. I think that's almost like a 4x. So let's say you missed that one. Could have taken it here. We broke down below the SMA, tested back above it, failed it again. That would have been a clean entry. Now, when it breaks the SMA, it's not quite enough information for us. Technically, could have taken a long there. Would have been a very, very short one. Not really a good one. I would say that's a C or a D tier because we're still pretty far away from the Bollinger Band, so we don't really have a ton of evidence to show us, okay, this is a great entry. It's not. This pretty good entry, I'd say that's somewhere between a B and an A because we have another interaction with the SMA. And in general, we want our entries to either have interactions with the top band or the bottom band of the Bollinger Bands. And we really want it to be on the other end of a strong interaction with the SMA. So this one only presented a good short because we already had to fight to break the SMA in the first place. We stayed above it. We got to a certain point where we could no longer sustain that, and then we broke down. So this one in particular, in order to stay in this short trade the whole time, what we would have been looking for is essentially, so let's say we entered here. We're in profit, we're in profit, we're in profit, we're still in profit, we're still in profit, we're still in profit. We have an invalidation right here. Would have been a good time to double down on this short trade. And then pretty much just continue to ride it. So here would have been a good time potentially to take some profits. That would have been about a 5% trade. Still pretty good. Nope, no, I don't want that. Still a great trade. But assuming we had enough size in it where we could wait right here. That would have been another point to double down if you are ballsy, because we get up to the SMA and fail it, and then really fail it, and that's when you make a lot of money on trades. Now again, this is 12 days total, so you don't necessarily want to just continue throwing money at this same setup over and over, because realistically, if you're buying IBIT, the price is going to change on the actual contract. So up here, you're looking at a $70 call is what you are in the money on. By the time you're over here, we're already at a $60 call. So it's still going to accrue intrinsic value, but you kind of just got to pay attention to that when you're factoring in your option contracts. Is your strike price is going to move on you, but still plenty of time in there for you to make a good profit off of that trade. But this guy in particular, we would have had multiple times where, okay, we start interacting with the bottom Bollinger Band. Is it a time to buy? Well, not really. We still see it sloping downward. And that's when, again, you want to check it against the higher time frames in those circumstances. And in that particular circumstance, which let's see the exact date on that. What was that? As Sunday, October 25th. So if we go back over to the daily time frame, so that's right around here. That's when we start to drop in earnest. So over here on the daily, we didn't get real confirmation of that until the 27th, which I think is what I said. What did I say over here? Yeah, 27th. So we have a break above it on the 26th, very late on the 26th, and then going into Monday, that would have been the clear short entry, and that would have been confirmed on the daily right here, where we registered a failure of 117.2. We got close to where the Bollinger Bands are on the top, indicating a short. So not quite as clean on the daily. That's why I like the 4 hour. The 4 hour gives us a lot cleaner evidence, but you got to be able to look at your higher time frames to understand the overall trend. And it would have been pretty clear looking at this that we were in a downtrend, because the daily SMA was dropping and continued to drop. So anywhere in here, I would have been checking, I'm still in this trade at this point. I would have been checking here. Okay, it's showing some strength here. Maybe I take some profits from my short there at this point. But realistically, when you want to be fully closed from a trade, and this is just personal preference, there's nothing wrong at all with taking, it's like a 5 or 10% trade. That's amazing. That's a really good in just a couple days. So at that point, you would have to decide based on the Fibonacci pivot interaction, do I want to close this entirely? Do I want to leave it and watch some of my profits get eaten away, which in fairness, again, if your entry is over here, you're still in profit here. So you have nothing to worry about. But basically, when we see another failure of the SMA, all that tells us is that we're going to keep going lower. So in this circumstance, let's say you bought somewhere in here for a short and you have waited. You saw it broke the SMA. Okay, cool. No reason to close it. It's gone down to here. Not quite enough evidence for us to close it. Close. Maybe a take profit. Bounces back up on the SMA. Still in profit. So still no real reason to panic. Maybe again, time to move around some capital if you are tight on your cash. But for the most part, we see a failure here. Cool, game on, stay in our short. And it's really here that we have some confluence of, okay, maybe it's time to get out of here. So say we got out of it here or somewhere in these candles, great short still. And then we would have just been looking essentially for a continuation of that trade because, okay, we can see here the SMA on the daily time frame still sloping downward. Nothing has changed about the higher time frame trend. We can check the weekly as well. Super ugly. So there would have been no reason at all. This is that first candle that we saw. There would have been no reason at all to get out of shorts during this time, as confirmed on the weekly trend. So in this particular instance, we could have jumped back into the trade here on that failure and rode it back down another, whatever that is, like 12%. I stand corrected, to 24%. Really good. So when we're looking for these setups, that is what we're looking for. We're looking for either a break of a candle to the bottom or the top side of the band. And then that's going to indicate to us that it needs to go in the opposite direction, very similar to like the RSI tool, which I don't really use. I mostly just use the Bollinger Bands and the Fibonacci pivots because I'm too lazy to draw my own Fibonacci retracements. So that's just an example of a couple of the last really good setups on the 4-hour chart as confirmed by the daily chart. A lot of times as well, I'll be looking for confirmation on the hourly time frame for some of these trades as well. Let's go look at the October 27th one more time. So this is October 27th. So as you can see, it's a little bit cleaner over here. So this guy, we're well outside of the Bollinger Band, clear short. We would have just had to be patient. It wouldn't have been immediately obvious at the time that we were correct about that. This would have been a time to double down on it. Again, candles breaking outside, great time for a short. And then it would have been the same thing. We would have had to watch for the SMA interaction. We would have had to decide, okay, is this enough profits where I feel comfortable jumping out of this position? 1% trade. Kind of boring, but that's still 10% on an option contract. That's still a good amount of money. And then same thing. This guy, clear short entry. This guy, not quite as good, but pretty good short entry. Same thing here. Failure of the SMA. So just to kind of recap what it is that we're looking for, and I do like to see a trend confirmed on multiple time frames. So normally when I'm taking trades, I'll be bouncing from the 4-hour to the 1 hour, and in the first couple hours of the day, I'll be looking at the 15-minute as well. All these guys, like I said, technically a long entry, just not a very good one. You want to pay attention to the broader trend, and if the broader trend is still downside continuation on the daily and the weekly, like we already looked at, then it's hard to just blindly ignore that and try and long into that, and you would not have been rewarded for those. Or it would have been like a 2% trade when the opposite side was a 24% trade. Just not really the game that you want to be playing. So this one, we start to see a curve. So this guy, technically, that would have given us indication to buy. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with taking little 3% trades. That's still pretty good, but it would have been invalidated there, and you would have needed to take profits. So this one is not one that you would have held all the way to here. That would have been a short, okay, cool, we're up to here, we've interacted with the SMA, I got to get out of this trade. And then you would have seen, oh, okay, we're breaking back down. That would have been another time to load up on a short. Again, not as good as if it interacted with the Bollinger Band, but still great evidence when it interacts with the SMA after trying to reclaim from the bottom side of the bands. So as we're going down lower here, that's what we were looking for. Is this a long? No, we're still sloping downward. Still technically could have made money from there. Still, like, that's the thing, is like a lot of times, nope, that's not what I was clicking. A lot of times that's still a 2 or 3% trade over a couple days. That's one day. Still pretty good. Like if you can still catch that and you can consistently make money on 1 to 2% trades, that's all you really need. You're not going to catch 20% trades all the time unless you're lucky and you just happen to be in the right setup. But lately we've had a lot more clear short entries than we have long entries. Like most of these are just, I would say, more obvious short entries than long entries. And then same thing over here. You would have had to be realistic about where we were with the trend at that time in November. Sorry, I'm yawning. It's early here. February, no, Jesus. Where the hell are we? November. Yeah, you would have had to be realistic about the trend. And the trend at that time was bearish. The SMA was still bottoming. So you really just have to decide the time length of your trade. Technically, these are longs. Technically, these are all longs. We're outside of the Bollinger Band. You could have longed any of these. You just would have had to close it by here, or you would have been very foolish. Which, again, what is that? That's a great trade. That's a great trade. So when you're looking for entries, you want to have confirmation on multiple time frames, but the 4-hour really, I think, is going to be what shows you the best entries. And then you just want to confirm that with the higher time frame so you understand trend. And then you can go to the lower time frames if you just want that little bit of extra confirmation, which sometimes it's not the case. This is the December 1st one. And it is, where is it? Over here. Yeah, in this case, it's more clear on the 4-hour than it is on the 1-hour. So that's why I like the 4-hour. I think it just gives more obvious entries that you can double check on the 1-hour. But for Bitcoin specifically, 4-hour works great. Let me know if you have any questions about this one. I know I rambled for a while, and I just used the last couple trading examples. This is something that I'm still developing myself in my own strategy. A lot of times, unfortunately, you're better off just trading something else other than Bitcoin with it because Bitcoin doesn't really move that much. But if you want to be really disciplined and just trade one chart, you can. That's perfectly acceptable. So let's take another look at how we would apply this to today, and then I'll get out of here and go write some threads. Again, go follow me over there. Go subscribe here if you are enjoying the content. Again, thank you guys so much. I'm really enjoying this channel so far, having a great time, just giving a little bit more analysis than I do over on Threads. So what would the trade have been today on Friday, which I woke up too late, so I did not take this. This would have been, so we're already in a trend at this point. We're already in a short trend from over here. Again, this is not an A or S setup. We're pretty far from the Bollinger Band. Taking a trade off of a fib pivot is fine. It's better than taking it off of thin air, like this guy. But, realistically, we're in a short. If we missed it, this is maybe a time to re-add to that short based on the interaction to this fib pivot at 92.6K that I talked about on Threads. But that would have been, that's Thursday. So your best case scenario for today, this is super early in the morning. This would have been, you would have taken this at midnight, essentially. Would have been a short at the moment. Now, we haven't seen confirmation of whether you should close that short or not. Bollinger Bands are tightening at the moment, which means we're going to see a snap either to the upside or the downside very soon. And if we get to the bottom side of the band, that would be an indication to close this short and take a long, theoretically. But we might see, on the higher time frame, what we might see is same thing. Bollinger Bands are tightening. So we're nowhere near over here, but we are close to the SMA. That's what's happening right now that's pulling down the price as we are retesting the daily SMA. Assuming we have a close at 4 p.m. PST today that is well above this, we're going to get another retest at 94, which would then pump us higher. And again, 96 is the one we need to watch on the anchored volume profile. Talked about that many, many times. But just to wrap up the video, that's what we'll be looking at for trades at the moment is the daily SMA. That's what we need to see an interaction with. If we have another break below it, we have spent pretty much all of November below it, which is not a bullish trend. And that would be, if it breaks it, then if you took a trade on Thursday or Friday today as a short, that would be enough reference for you to stay in that trade to see where it runs to. If it retests it now and shows strength, that would be a good time to close that short and potentially buy a long. Now, again, that's not an S tier entry. It's not an A tier entry. It's about a B tier entry because we're just going off of the SMA. Really, it's kind of a separate trade setup than going off the band specifically, but because it's the same indicator, I would still say somewhere between an A and a B setup if we have a strong reaction here and then an impulse to the upside, but not as good as over here or over here. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Bit of a different video than I normally do. A lot of times I just ramble about the higher time frames, but you can go watch one of my other videos for that because I've already done those pretty in depth. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. I've been Jacob. Have a lovely day.